everyone, and welcome to the Code Clarity podcast. I'm Rena Newton, and today I have a guest speaker on with me, as Hazim, and he's going to introduce himself in a minute, but I'm delighted that he's going to be talking to us all about websites. Hazim, over to you. What is your current title, company? Let us all know.
Hi everyone, so I'm Hazim Al-Rais and I've worked for over 10 years in the pharmaceutical industry, currently with Astellas Pharmaceuticals, but all opinions I share today will be my own and from my experience across multiple different companies. And to be honest, over the last 10 years, I've worked on local websites, I've worked on global websites that have been localized, I've worked on portals for healthcare professionals, worked on different access, and during the height of the pandemic really worked on the definition of things like consent and privacy policies and cookie all the kind of things that come around actually hosting websites and what they mean.
Perfect. And although, Hazim, you've been trained to sort of a quite high level in terms of code compliance, almost to a signatory level, would it be fair to say that your role when it comes to websites has predominantly been an originator and working with agencies?
Definitely, I think it's an originator, I'd say co-creator in some cases, all depending on the circumstances, and also the translator of what the purpose and the meaning of that website is back to signatories and also to the audience in terms of the layout and how it actually gets out there.
Okay, so a few things I want to sort of just explore with you. Firstly, working with agencies. And co-creating, I think, is the term, that you're using there. What would be your kind of top tip when it comes to the audience in relation to how did you find was the best way to work with agencies?
I mean, to be honest, the thing that you always need to keep in mind is the racy. And at the end of the day, you can hand out responsibility for kind of the execution of things, but the ultimate accountability stays within the company and stays within the people who are actually creating that content, managing it and its intent and purpose, all the fabs that you've always talked to me about being factual, accurate, balanced, etc. So that all applies in all cases. And you are the one who is the A. You're the accountable at the end of the day.
The accountable, yeah. And that's such a good, when you look at the cases in this area, in all areas, it is so abundantly clear that the company is always responsible for their agency, for their acts and for their omissions. So I think that's a really good reminder. You also mentioned there about kind of setting up the signatories to never fail. What does that look like in practice? Have you got any examples of the kind of things that you would have allowed them to sort of utilize?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's all about training and speaking the same language. So I think there's only one way to be successful, and it's to kind of predict the most common things that will be misinterpreted in terms of language, in terms of layouts, and to kind of manage how those things are being communicated and understood before you even arrive to a level of signing things off in any system. So kind of the training that comes behind that, making sure that people understand how websites work and sizing and how things may move and all this sort of stuff, and taking the essence of the code, really making sure that the key things that you expect to check as a foundational, like black boxes, like code numbers, all that sort of stuff, is what's it going to look like in a new environment? Where is it going to be?
Does that mean that if I was a signatory and I'm looking at a website, I'm going to get information from you proactively as to how this will look now if it's on a mobile optimized kind of site?
You will get information from me proactively. There'll be screenshots and attachments, even though one version of it might be going through approval. And there'll also be things like little grey boxes that go around for you to understand which parts may be moving up and down the screen or may become bigger or smaller, depending on the size of that screen. One thing that you have to bear in mind is what we do as tests is we just ensure that even if something is at its smaller size, that it's still compliant in terms of font, in terms of visibility and all that sort of stuff.
And One of the things I was going to pull out there was language, because sometimes I deal with people who don't necessarily understand, and I'm not a digital expert myself. I mean, this week I was talking about Google indexing, and I learned from a very kind comment on LinkedIn, which is a great platform just for learning, that it is possible to block Google from crawling your websites with a simple addition of a no index meta tag. And I thought, wow, that's so, and I'm going to use that now with everybody. So any good tips for the audience on language barriers and things like that?
I think what I have to say is that in this day and age, and with the complexity of everything that we approve, you have to think of your website as two key areas or spaces. One is kind of like the vehicle for delivery, or the website itself and the framework of it, and the other is going to be the content or the packages that you're delivering. And it's important that every package you deliver is labeled properly, is well addressed, has the right audience in mind, and is delivered to the right location. So all those things, if you think about that sort of analogy, is super important when
Yeah.
you come to building websites.
Yeah, I love it. So what you're saying is there's a difference between building a Maserati and a Fiat Uno. No offense to any Fiat Uno drivers out there.
Yes,
The delivery is important,
that's
right?
exactly it. And it also determines the speed.
Ah, yes, of course. You see, I'm quite used to saying that compliance is the engine of your car, but now you're saying actually you give a different car analogy. I love it. Okay, any
Yeah.
other top tips about maybe people that you work with, moving away from that kind of the systems and the processes, but thinking about people that you work with, whether they are digital natives, how do you make them a digital native?
I think definitely, yeah. People who are more comfortable with digital space, and ultimately, all of us have to join that race at some point, and upskill ourselves, etc. But in terms of working with individuals, I do tend to take the time out before as well to look at their comfort levels when it comes to technology and
Mm,
websites and all that sort of stuff, and their understanding. And there are some people who are a bit more averse to approving anything digital at the moment, and we'll, for example, ask for every single permutation of a specific website if something changes. So you have the mobile site, the big site, etc. But ultimately, I think the world is changing. The code is catching up, sometimes slowly, sometimes on time, depends on the topic. But that's where it is really important to pick people that you can have open conversations with. And, like we
mm,
said, never have those conversations via the system. Always spend the time beforehand to have those conversations face to face or virtually, like we're
mm.
doing now.
Perfect. And that's such a great sort of ending to our short chat. I think I've definitely worked with people who are open in saying, I don't understand, what I'm looking at here or how this works. And we all prefer working with people who are open to understanding and gaining a bit more knowledge. The worst kind of people will be the ones who don't understand, block, and won't approve. So, on that bombshell, Hazim, thank you so much for your time today.
You're most
Really
welcome.
appreciate all the advice and top tips. All right, take care.
Thanks, Rena.